Welcome back to my universe. I'm Lo. Last episode, we talked about stepping into my power publicly, about the anxiety of being seen, about how God held me while I delivered my leadership journey in front of people who mattered. But that moment of visibility, that required something underneath it. It required a mind that could hold clarity under pressure. A mind that could translate my experience into words. A mind that could translate my lived experiences into words. A mind that never stops firing, especially when I'm terrified. And the world has spent decades telling me that mind is broken. This is the story of learning that it's not. This is about my idea factory, about decades of medication that didn't work, about discovering that spirituality, not pharmaceuticals, was my answer all along. This is about embracing what I was taught to suppress. So my mind has never stopped, not for a single day of my life. I wake up with ideas. I go to sleep with ideas still firing. Someone once told me that by the time an average person finishes a single thought, I've already completed 10. And that is honestly not an exaggeration. A breeze blows past my face. I take a deep breath and feel the air fill my lungs. That's the deepest breath I've taken all day. So immediately I start analyzing. What was different about that breath I just took? How can I reproduce it? How can I make that my baseline? And then I notice the leaves moving. Which direction is the wind coming from? How far did it travel? That leads me to think about the tree itself. How old is it? What's its lineage? Is that moss or fungus on its bark? Think we can eat it? Why does it have one leaf longer than the other? How many seeds has it scattered, do you think? How many people has it watched grow up? What stories have unfolded in its presence? What tragedies? What lessons could it teach me? How can I help it survive? How can it help me? One observation becomes 10,000 questions in an endless spiral of connection. That's my baseline. That is just my mind operating normally. I call it my idea factory. But society has a different name for it. When I was a kid, I was never considered gifted. I was just hard to manage. Teachers couldn't figure out what to do with me. I asked too many questions. I'd make connections they couldn't anticipate or answer. I'd see patterns in things that seemed unrelated. I'd challenge systems they rely on or didn't even fully understand. But instead of nurturing that, they just labeled it. By the time I was 10 or 12, doctors decided I was depressed. So, I went on my first medication. Not just one, many. And I had tried them all across decades of my life. Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, different SSRIs, different dosages, different combinations. Each one promised to fix what was broken in me. And each one came with side effects that required other medications to manage those side effects. I spent years in a pharmaceutical maze, taking pills to sleep, taking pills to wake up, taking pills to feel normal, taking pills to manage the effects of the other pills. Nothing worked. The depression diagnosis evolved. By adulthood, they started calling it anxiety. The mind that never stopped firing? Yeah, that was a disorder. A human malfunction. Something requiring chemical intervention. People lost patience with me. Teachers, bosses, partners. They all eventually reached the same conclusion. There is something wrong with this girl. And I believed them. And then I internalized it. I became convinced that my mind was fundamentally broken. And then I became a mom, and I saw myself in my oldest daughter. She thinks like I think. Her mind moves like my mind moves. She makes connections other people miss, and she asks questions that make them uncomfortable. She sees patterns. And I watched how people responded to her. The same impatience, the same labeling, the same subtle messages. There's something wrong with you. So I made a decision. I will not pass this down. I will not teach my daughter that her mind is broken, and I will not medicate her into compliance. I'm not going to make her smaller so that other people feel comfortable. But breaking that cycle meant I had to break it first in myself. So as an adult, I finally got the official diagnosis: ADHD and ADD. The doctor prescribed Adderall. At first, it seemed to work. My mind quieted, things felt more manageable. But then the costs started to become visible. I lost 70 pounds, and my body was deteriorating. I was spiraling. Something was fundamentally wrong. So I went back to the doctor, and she switched me. Antipsychotics this time. Serving as a sleep medication, she said. And then a non-stimulant for the ADHD. Another cocktail of pharmaceuticals designed to manage what modern medicine had decided was my broken brain. And I was taking all of it, following the protocol, trusting the system. But I was disappearing, and my body was rejecting it. My spirit was suffocating. I finally reached a breaking point. I realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. No medicine was ever going to fix this. Not because there was something to fix, but because the problem was never biological. The problem was that I'd been taught to hate my own mind. I'd been conditioned to suppress my natural way of thinking. I'd been medicated into silence instead of taught to harness my gifts. So I stopped taking the pills. I started listening to myself. That's when my spiritual journey truly began. Not as a wellness trend, but as survival, as a rebellion against a system that had failed me. I went back to yoga, which I used to cope in my 20s, but never fully embraced. Yoga led me to Qigong, and Qigong led me to meditation. And meditation, that's where I finally found what all those pharmaceuticals promised but never delivered. Peace. Joy. I changed what I ate, eliminated sugar, reduced caffeine, started eating fresher food. More veggies, more wholesome things, less processed everything across the board. I moved my body more, spent more time barefoot on the earth. More meditation, more breathing, more stillness. And something shifted. The idea factory didn't stop. My mind didn't become quiet or manageable or normal. It kept firing at the same speed, kept making connections. It continues to ask 10,000 questions. But something else changed. The external noise. The voices telling me I was broken. The need for validation and the pressure to be different than who I am. That noise quieted. And when the external noise quieted, I could finally hear my mind clearly. Instead of fighting it, I started flowing with it. Instead of medicating it, I just started channeling it. And instead of seeing it as broken, I started to see it as a gift. And let me be clear about something. This was not easy. Stopping the medications meant going against everything the medical establishment had told me. I spent years studying psychology, neuroscience. It meant trusting myself now more than I trusted doctors and researchers, trained professionals. It meant being willing to figure it out on my own. It took years to rebuild my body after all those pharmaceuticals. took a lot of time to learn how to move through the world without the chemical buffer I'd relied on. And it took strength to stand in front of my doctors and say, your solution is not working for me. I'm gonna try something different. It took courage to trust that my spiritual practice, the yoga, the meditation, the qigong, the time in nature, could do what decades of pills could not. It took discipline to change my diet, my movement, my relationship with my own mind. And it took a lot of vulnerability to admit that I didn't know the answer, but I was willing to try a different way. And it took radical self-love to look at my mind, that same mind that had been labeled broken my entire life, and say, you are not broken. You are absolutely brilliant. Your idea factory is not a malfunction. It's your superpower. The way you connect dots, the way you see patterns, the way your thoughts spiral into infinite possibility, the way you ask questions nobody else thinks to ask, the way you make leaps that seem impossible until you explain them and suddenly everyone understands. That's not something that's broken. That's a God-given gift. And the world tried to medicate that gift away because it makes people uncomfortable. Because it challenges their systems and their healing. Because it doesn't fit into their definition of normal. So here I am, years later. I am completely medicine-free. And my quality of life is better than it's ever been on pharmaceuticals. I sleep better. I think clearer. My body is strong, my mind is sharp. I have energy and presence and peace. Big Pharma was not the answer for me. The answer was me. It was learning to trust myself. It was developing spiritual practices that quieted the external noise so I could hear the internal transmission. It was moving my body, nourishing it with real food, spending time in nature, meditating, breathing. The answer was choosing to honor my mind instead of fighting it. And I'm not saying medication doesn't help some people. All I'm saying is it didn't help me. And for years, I let the system convince me that my refusal to accept their solution meant I was refusing help. But real help looked like spiritual practice. Real help looked like listening to my body instead of the doctors who do not inhabit it. Real help looked like learning to manage my mind through alignment, not through suppression. The idea factory doesn't stop. It never will. By the time you finish reading this sentence, my mind will have completed 10 more thoughts. But I'm not ashamed of that anymore. I'm no longer trying to medicate it into silence. I'm learning to channel it, to use it, to trust it. I'm learning that stillness doesn't mean stopping your thoughts. It means quieting the external noise so you can finally hear your internal voice clearly. So here's what I want you to know, if your mind works like mine. If you think too fast, if you make connections others don't see, if you ask questions that make people uncomfortable, if you see patterns across systems, if your thoughts spiral into infinite possibility, if you've been labeled scattered, chaotic, too much, broken, you're not broken. The system that told you it is, that's what's broken. You might have been given a diagnosis, you might be on medications, you might have spent years believing that your natural way of thinking is a malfunction. But what if it's not? What if your mind is exactly what it's supposed to be? What if the problem isn't your brain chemistry, but the world's inability to honor brains that work differently? What if instead of medicating your gifts into silence, you learn to channel them, to cultivate them, to use them in service of something bigger than yourself? That's the invitation. That's the work I'm still doing. Learning to embrace the mind that society spent decades trying to suppress. Learning to say, I am who I am. My mind works the way that it works. And I'm not apologizing for that anymore. That's the strength you're capable of. That's the reclamation waiting for you. And that's my universe for today. I'm Lo. Thank you for being here while I talk about idea factories, about medication and spirituality, about learning to embrace what the world calls broken. If you've spent years believing something is wrong with your mind, know this. Your doubt about that diagnosis is legitimate. Your instinct that there's more to the story is so real. And you're brave enough to figure it out yourself. We'll see you next time. And until then, keep your face to the sunshine and move to the beat of your own drum.